It was a chilly April morning when the world of Vincent Carrington, one of the most powerful tycoons in the city, was about to change forever. High above the bustle of downtown, in his glass and steel penthouse office, Vincent sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, scanning the latest quarterly earnings report. The numbers were flawless, every projection exceeded, margins at all-time highs. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success, a man whose word could move markets, whose approval could make or break executives. Emotions, to Vincent, were liabilities. Relationships were distractions. Love was unnecessary. Yet behind the polished veneer of confidence, a faint ache had begun to stir in his chest. It was subtle at first, a brief hesitation before signing a contract, a restless glance toward a photograph tucked into his desk drawer. He'd kept that faded Polaroid hidden from everyone, himself included, and it stood a younger Vincent in a simple linen suit, beaming beside a woman with curly auburn hair, her arm wrapped gently around his waist. Between them, a little girl with bright brown eyes held a stuffed bunny and beamed up at the camera. The caption on the back, written in a familiar scrawl, read, "Forever. Love always, Ellie and Mia." Why did he still carry it? He wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps, in some corner of his mind, he couldn't let go of what he'd sacrificed for power. Good morning, dear reader. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to our channel of real-life tales that pierce the heart and remind us of the ties that matter most. If you enjoy this story of transformation and redemption, go ahead and subscribe now and click that bell icon so you won't miss our next journey into the lives of extraordinary people. Vincent rose from his chair and poured himself a scotch. Neat, of course. He raised the glass to his lips with the practiced precision of a man used to controlling every detail. The amber liquid burned as it slid down his throat, igniting a fleeting warmth that his own triumphs never could. He set the glass down and leaned back, letting his gaze drift across the city skyline. Dawn's pale light glinted off the towering skyscrapers, each one a testament to his empire. And yet, a nagging whisper of something lost tugged at his mind. He rifled through the file cabinet beside his desk, pulling out a thick dossier labeled Crescent Holdings Staff Profile. His eyes scanned quickly until they locked on one entry, Mia Carrington. His heart skipped a beat. Beneath her name was a single line of text, position, janitorial staff, Unit 4B. Vincent frowned. Unit 4B? A cleaning job? The words felt like a sucker punch to his gut. He flipped through the dossier, but found little else. No evaluations, no recommendations. Just her name and that matter-of-fact title. He closed the file and leaned back, mind racing. How had she ended up here, wiping floors and emptying trash cans in some nondescript office building? He pressed a button on his desk phone and spoke crisply to his assistant, Marissa. "Find the address for Crescent Holdings Unit 4B. I want to see this for myself." Her smooth voice replied, "Right away, Mr. Carrington." As he waited for the information, Vincent's thoughts drifted back 5 years, to a time before boardrooms and skyscrapers consumed him. Mia had been vivacious and kind, with dreams of opening an art studio for underprivileged children. Ellie, his ex-wife, had supported those dreams before their worlds diverged. He'd beg her to join him on the road to corporate conquest. She'd asked him to slow down, to build a family first. Their arguments had grown more heated until at last, the marriage crumbled under the weight of his ambition. He watched them leave, Ellie clutching Mia's hand, tears in both their eyes, while he returned to his empire, convinced he'd made the only sensible choice. Now, those memories felt like shards of ice in his chest. He set his jaw, a new resolve forming. If his daughter was out there, working day in and day out, unknown and uncelebrated, he needed to know why. And maybe, just maybe, he needed to remember what it felt like to be a father. A moment later, Marissa's voice snapped him back to the present. "Sir, the address is 1274 Hartwell Street. It's a small 4-story building near the river. Do you need a car arranged?" He shook off the remnants of hesitation. "Send the car. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He stood, smoothing his tailored suit. The penthouse felt colder than ever as he left the office, Scotch glass abandoned. As he descended in the private elevator, Vincent Carrington, Tycoon extraordinaire, prepared to step into a world he'd long ago forsaken, for a truth he wasn't yet ready to face. High above the thrumming city streets, in a tower of gleaming glass and steel, Vincent Carrington ruled his domain like a monarch surveying his realm. From this vantage point, on the 65th floor of the Carrington Center, he could see miles of concrete arteries pulsing with the lifeblood of commerce. His empire spanned real estate developments, luxury hospitality, private equity funds, and a burgeoning tech startup incubator. Every morning, briefing papers arrived on his desk, neatly organized by priority. Mergers, acquisitions, shareholder projections, legal disputes. Every evening, he signed off on millions of dollars in transactions, then retreated to his penthouse, where his solitary silhouette was reflected in floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Vincent's reputation in the boardroom was formidable. He was known as the Arctic Shark, a moniker earned for his cool, calculating demeanor and relentless pursuit of profit. Opponents recounted tales of him walking away from multi-billion-dollar deals because the terms weren't perfect enough. Subordinates learned quickly that his approval was as elusive as it was prized. To earn his respect required not only top-tier performance, but an unfailing ability to anticipate his next strategic move. Show weakness, and you risked being swiftly cut from his favor. Or worse, witness your career stall permanently under his icy gaze. He wore his power like bespoke Italian tailoring. In the morning, his driver delivered him to the headquarters in a midnight blue sedan, the leather seats molded to his frame. He stepped on a marble foyer with effortless confidence. Polished Oxford shoes, crisp white shirt, custom-tailored charcoal suit, and an understated silver cufflink engraved with the Carrington crest. He greeted his executive assistants with a curt nod, and they, in turn, greeted one another with respectful deference, stepping aside to clear his path. Every handshake was firm, every "good morning, Mr. Carrington" delivered with a hint of nervous reverence. In meetings, Vincent spoke in measured tones, articulating his vision in bullet points and bottom lines. He valued brevity over banter, data over anecdotes. He would pore over spreadsheets and financial models for hours, eyes scanning columns of figures until inconsistencies leapt out at him. If a projection didn't meet his standards, he would dismantle the assumptions one by one, questioning every revenue estimate and expense forecast until the presenter either capitulated or walked away in defeat. Despite, or perhaps because of his steely exterior, he amassed an inner circle of loyal collaborators who understood that aligning with Vincent meant access to the highest echelons of power. They appreciated his clarity of purpose. He set audacious goals and, more important, held them accountable to achieve those goals. There was no room for excuses, only for results. In return, he rewarded success with promotions, bonuses, and the rare, unspoken approval that came in the form of trust. Trust to lead critical divisions, trust to explore new markets, trust to represent Carrington Enterprises at global summits. Yet beneath the polished veneer and clinical pragmatism, there was an undercurrent of isolation. Vincent rarely socialized outside of work. Invitations to gala dinners and charity balls often went unanswered, either declined outright by his assistant or accepted with an abrupt cancellation at the last minute. He considered relationships a distraction. Emotional entanglements threatened to cloud his judgment. Many speculated that his singular focus was born of a childhood marked by instability. A father who abandoned the family when Vincent was 10, and a mother who struggled to make ends meet, her dreams of domestic bliss shattered by his early departure. Business, for Vincent, was the one domain he could control completely. In the rare moments when he allowed himself a respite from deal-making, he indulged in solitude. His penthouse was minimalist to the point of sterility. A few pieces of modern art on the walls, a grand piano that had never been played, and a library shelf lined with hardcover biographies of captains of industry. He sipped scotch from crystal tumblers, each sip measured and deliberate, as though he were tasting the very essence of his achievements. The only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and the distant rush of car horns far below. His evenings were spent reviewing dossiers on potential acquisitions, conducting due diligence calls with attorneys and analysts scattered across time zones. He rarely saw daylight on weekends, preferring to immerse himself in the digital glow of spreadsheets and presentation decks. When colleagues pressed him about life outside work, he deflected with a succinct quip, "I find my fulfillment in growth metrics and market share." They nodded, assuming he meant it. But sometimes, very rarely, Vincent would catch a glimpse of something beyond balance sheets that stirred an unexpected pang in his chest. A stray memory, laughter from a family picnic long ago, the way his daughter's hair caught the sunlight, the soft touch of his ex-wife's hand in his. He dismissed these thoughts as distractions and steeled himself against them, focusing instead on the next quarter's targets. Yet the photograph on his desk drawer, the one of him with Ellie and Mia, had begun to feel heavier each day, as if it held a secret he wasn't ready to face. To the world, Vincent Carrington was the embodiment of cold efficiency, a man whose heart was as impenetrable as the steel beams supporting his skyscrapers. But hidden beneath that facade lay a man haunted by what he had forsaken. He had sacrificed personal connections on the altar of ambition, winning accolades and riches, but paying the price of solitude. And now, when he least expected it, a rumor had reached him. His ex-wife, the woman he once promised forever to, was working as a janitor in a modest office building. His daughter, his own flesh and blood, was with her. The notion of Mia Carrington scrubbing floors, of Ellie wiping desks, was almost too much to bear. For the first time in years, Vincent felt the stirrings of something besides profit, a tumult of guilt, sorrow, and a fierce, unbidden longing to set things right. He straightened his ties in the reflective surface of the elevator doors as he descended to ground level. The limousine awaited outside, engine idling. His knuckles whitened on the leather armrest as he ordered the driver. 1274 Hartwell Street. Let's see what truth looks like. And so, in the heart of his empire, the cold-hearted tycoon resolved to step into the unknown, driven by a question he could no longer ignore. What had become of the family he left behind? Late one afternoon, Vincent Carrington stood in his corner office overlooking the glittering expanse of the financial district. Despite the advancing hour, the room remained brightly lit by the brisk spring sun, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. He was on a video call with a high-ranking executive from Aurora Dynamics, negotiating terms for a joint venture that promised to redefine energy storage technology. Every few seconds, Vincent's carefully trimmed eyebrows would arch in quiet calculation, his gaze never straying from the spreadsheet projected on the large screen. On the far side of the table sat Gregory Shaw, Aurora's COO, a smooth talker with an easy laugh and a reputation for sealing deals with charm rather than coercion. Tonight's discussion hinged on the valuation of Aurora's patents. Vincent wanted a minority stake in exchange for capital investment, while Gregory pressed for a non-dilutive grant that would allow Aurora to maintain its independence. Tension rippled through the call like an undercurrent, but Vincent remained composed, dissecting each term with surgical precision. Just as he prepared to deliver his opening salvo, a faint chime interrupted the proceedings, an incoming message on the secure enterprise messenger. Vincent frowned. Distracting pings were rare at this hour. He toggled the sidecar window on his screen and scanned the note. It was from Alicia Moreno, a mid-level associate in Carrington's corporate intelligence division. "Sir, you may want to see this." Subject: Hartwell Street janitorial staff, Mia Carrington. Brief: we confirm via site visit and HR logs that your ex-wife, Ellie Carrington, has been employed as cleaning staff at 1274 Hartwell Street for 6 months. Also cited, a child matching Mia Carrington, approximately 4 years old, frequently on premises after school hours. His breath caught. That child's face had haunted his dreams for years. Bright eyes, mischievous grin, the little girl he once held in his arms. He stared at the screen as if the words might dissolve before his eyes. Gregory on the other end waited, eyebrow arched in polite inquiry. "Is everything all right, Mr. Carrington?" Gregory's voice crackled through the speaker. Vincent cleared his throat and clicked "Do Not Disturb" on his messenger. He forced a nod of assent, though Gregory couldn't see it. "Yes. Apologies. Let's reconvene tomorrow. My schedule's shifted." He ended the call abruptly. For a moment, the room felt unnaturally still. The faint hum of the HVAC was the only sound. He stared at the darkened video window, dislodging uncomfortable memories of his former life. He thought back to the day he and Ellie had moved into their first apartment, a modest two-bedroom unit filled with plants and hand-me-down furniture. They'd scraped together enough for a small canvas to hang above the couch. Mia, then a baby cradled in Ellie's arms, batted at the paint tubes spilling from a cardboard box. They were happy, tangled in the innocence of first love and the promise of shared dreams. That man felt a lifetime away. Vincent strode to the floor-to-ceiling windows and pressed his palm against the cool glass. Below him, cars flowed like a river of steel. Pedestrians wove patterns of urgency. He took a steadying breath and pulled out his phone, dialing Marissa's extension with deliberate calm. "Marissa, confirm Alicia's report. I want payroll records, HR logs, site visit photos, everything on Ellie and Mia Carrington at Hartwell Street. Prioritize it. I want updates every hour." He paused, then added quietly, "And set aside my 6 p.m. commitments. I'm going there myself." He ended the call before Marissa could protest. In that moment, his corporate persona, the unflappable shark, shivered. How could Ellie, who once stood beside him at every groundbreaking ceremony, be reduced to wiping desks? How could Mia, his daughter, be scraping gum off the floors he now dominated? The very notion defied his sense of order and control. He paced the length of the office, hands clasped behind his back. His footsteps echoed, a steady metronome to his spiraling thoughts. Pride warred with guilt. Anger laced his heart. Anger at himself for abandoning them. Anger at fate for allowing their fall from grace. Anger at a system that tied his ex-wife to a broom rather than giving her the lifeline he could have provided. Yet beneath the fury flickered something tender. Concern, a father's protectiveness long buried beneath ambition's stone. He realized he'd never asked about Ellie's well-being after their divorce, never bothered to learn if Mia had braces, what she liked to draw, how she'd taken to kindergarten. He'd left them behind as collateral damage in his pursuit of success, convinced that providing financial security equated to love. Now, that conviction felt hollow. Vincent's reflection in the glass showed a sharply dressed man with steel-gray eyes, eyes that no longer shimmered with the pride of conquest, but glistened with uncertainty. He pressed his forehead to the glass, as if searching the horizon for answers. In that instant, a single thought crystallized in his mind. He needed to witness their lives with his own eyes. Reports and pictures wouldn't suffice. He needed to see Ellie's face, to hear Mia's voice, to feel once more the pulse of the family he had forsaken. He straightened, smoothing the lapel of his impeccably tailored suit. The gears of his mind, so accustomed to financial models and market forecasts, shifted now to a different calculus, one measured in human emotion rather than EBITDA margins. He gathered the dossiers Alicia had already forwarded, blurred security camera stills of Ellie pushing a mop bucket, a grainy shot of Mia holding a stuffed rabbit outside the building's rear entrance. He flipped through them like a man scanning a passport he'd once held but forgotten. Night was falling by the time he slipped out his office. Flicking the elevator button, he descended through 65 floors of glass and steel, reminding himself that what lay ahead was not a hostile takeover, but a journey back to the heart of his own humanity. His driver waited in the subterranean garage, the sedan's polished hood gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Vincent climbed in wordlessly and gave the address, Hartwell Street. As the engine roared to life, he allowed a single, rare admission. He was terrified, not of failure, not of lost revenue or broken contracts, but of facing the consequences of a life lived too long in service of ambition. He wondered if Ellie would see him coming, if Mia would even remember his face. And as the city lights blurred past in the rearview mirror, Vincent Carrington, the ice shark of finance, felt something thawing inside him. an ember of hope that perhaps it was not too late to find redemption. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tinted windows of Vincent Carrington's limousine as it swept through the city streets, the car's engine purring like a contented beast. He sat rigid in the back seat, his posture immaculate, suit jacket buttoned, fingers interlaced atop his knee. Yet beneath that composed exterior, his mind roiled with unease. 30 minutes ago, he had issued a curt order, 1274 Hartwell Street. Now, since then, every mile drawn behind them had felt fraught, as if each block carried him deeper into a dream he never meant to revisit. He peered at his reflection in the dark window, crisp tie, pristine cufflinks, a face set in iron resolve. The city lights flickered overhead as they passed beneath elevated highways. Outside, the urban cacophony of honking cars and chattering pedestrians ebbed beneath the hushed hum of the climate control system. His driver, Marco, guided the black sedan through traffic, glancing once in the rearview mirror with a polite nod. He knew better than to ask questions. Vincent replayed the HR report in his head, scrutinizing every line. Employed 6 months, cleaning staff, part-time evening shift. He'd seen the tattered, grainy photograph Alicia had sent. Ellie Carrington, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun, hunched over a mop bucket against a backdrop of pale gray cubicles. And the child, Mia, clutching a battered stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with trust as she waited for her mother at the building's back entrance. In those images, he saw not just their faces, but the enormity of what he'd lost. He took a measured breath. The path ahead diverged from anything he'd known in years. No boardroom negotiations, no spreadsheets, no talking points. Instead, mops, cleaning carts, and the unfiltered reality of a life reduced to janitorial duties. He wondered if Ellie recognized him in the photo. Had she glanced at the camera, detected that familiar bone structure or the tilt of his jaw? Probably not, especially not in security footage, blurred and distant. But he would ensure she recognized him now. As the limousine approached Hartwell Street, Vincent steadied himself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple black baseball cap and a dark gray windbreaker, purchased that morning on Marissa's instruction to look as inconspicuous as possible. He hesitated for a moment, gripping the cap's brim, then placed it on his head and shrugged into the windbreaker. The transformation was subtle but effective. No bespoke tailoring, no gleaming cufflinks, no polished leather. He was just another man stepping into a building. "Thank you, Marco," he said quietly, his voice low but firm. "Stay here. I'll be back shortly." Marco nodded and locked the doors, lowering the windows to allow the evening air to filter in. Vincent slipped out, closed the door behind him, and turned toward the nondescript brick facade of 1274 Hartwell Street. The building was a low-rise structure of unadorned red brick, 4 stories tall, its windows small and utilitarian. A modest sign beside the entrance read Crescent Professional Suites. The glass double doors were framed by chipped paint, and a small plaque near the intercom panel proclaimed the hours of operation: 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. He approached the intercom panel and pressed a button to call the management office. A crackling voice answered. "Crescent Suites, how may I help you?" Vincent cleared his throat, forcing a casual tone. "Hi, I'm here to pick up a file from management. Is there someone who can let me in?" "Sure thing," the voice replied without hesitation. "Give me your name, and I'll buzz you in." He considered giving a false name, safe, professional, but decided it was unnecessary. "Mr. Carrington," he said, "I'm here on behalf of Carrington Enterprises. I was supposed to collect some documents for Mr. Shaw." There was a pause, then the clicking sound of the door release. "Welcome, Mr. Carrington." The door swung open with a soft whoosh. Vincent stepped inside, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. He paused for a heartbeat to take in the lobby. It was small, just enough space for a reception desk, a couple of potted plants, and a beat-up couch whose cushions had clearly seen better days. Pale fluorescent lights hummed overhead, lending the space a drab, institutional feel. The reception desk was unoccupied, its surface cluttered with paperwork, an empty coffee cup, and a malfunctioning printer that flashed an error message in bright red letters. Vincent calculated his next move. The third-floor janitorial closet was where Alicia's notes said Ellie kept her cleaning supplies. But he needed to see her in action, mop in hand, gloves on, performing a task she never would have imagined herself doing. He walked to the central elevator bank, tapped the 4 button he'd start on the floor listed in the HR logs, and waited. The ding of the arriving elevator echoed in the narrow shaft. Pressing the button, he stepped inside the small metal car, its stainless steel walls marked with fingerprints and scuff marks. The overhead panel showed each floor's number in bright LEDs. As the elevator ascended, Vincent's pulse quickened. He brushed his hand over his jacket's pocket where his phone lay silent, its notifications muted. Here, there would be no digital buffer, no status updates or electronic memos to insulate him from the reality he was about to face. The elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, revealing a corridor lined with small office suites, each behind a door labeled with a suite number and the occupant's name. He stepped out, the carpeted floor muffling his footsteps. The air here smelled faintly of cleaning solution and worn carpet underlay. The overhead lights flickered intermittently, a harsh contrast to the soft glow of his penthouse home. He glanced at the suite numbers until he found 4B. The door was closed. He could hear the distant hum of conversation, likely office workers wrapping up their day. Vincent leaned close, listening. There was a faint scrubbing sound, rhythmic and steady. His pulse thudded in his ears. He straightened, placed a hand on the doorknob, and pushed the door open with the tip of his shoe. He didn't want to startle her. Instead, he lingered in the semi-darkness of the hallway, letting his eyes adjust before stepping fully inside. The room beyond was a medium-sized office space. Large windows overlooking the river, rows of empty desks, now spotless thanks to diligent cleaning. A half-full trash bin sat by the door. And there, in the center of the room, was Ellie Carrington, her auburn hair tied back in a practical ponytail, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She wore simple black slacks and a blue polo shirt with the company logo embroidered on the chest. Her back was turned as she pushed a mop across the polished floorboards. The soft hum of the water wringer and the steady swish of the mop created a rhythmic cadence. For a moment, Vincent could not move. He watched her in silence, taking in the gentle tilt of her shoulders, the graceful arc of her arm. She moved with the same poise he remembered from years ago, only now her posture bore the weight of exhaustion. He noted the faint crease of worry etched between her brows and the weariness in her movements. He swallowed hard. The reality of what he had asked himself to witness struck him full in the chest. This was his ex-wife, his Ellie, who once walked beside him on red carpets and philanthropic galas. A woman who spoke at fundraisers in satin dresses, whose laughter once filled the grand ballroom of their wedding. And now she was here, scrubbing floors in a quiet office building, completely unaware that the man who had left her was watching from the threshold. Vincent Carrington, the ice shark of corporate boardrooms, stood in the doorway of a humdrum office and felt the ice around his heart crack and begin to melt. Vincent's heart throbbed as he stood motionless in the doorway, transfixed by a sight he never imagined he would see. Ellie Carrington, once the elegant socialite beside him at every gala, the vibrant partner in his dreams, stood at the center of the otherwise quiet office, clad in a faded blue polo shirt and plain black slacks. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a harsh glow on the rows of gleaming desks and empty swivel chairs, but softened as they fell upon her auburn hair, now pulled back into a simple ponytail. She was bent slightly at the waist, one hand gripping the worn wooden handle of a mop, the other steadying herself against a wringer bucket filled with soapy water. Each arc of her arm was careful, reverent almost, as she guided the mop back and forth across the linoleum floor. She worked with a deliberation born of routine, an automatic grace that spoke of countless evenings spent performing this very task. Vincent swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He noticed the gentle curve of her neck as she reached, the fine lines at the corner of her eye that hadn't existed 10 years ago. He had missed those details, the way her hair caught the light, the soft angle of her collarbone, the hesitant shrink of her shoulders whenever she paused to catch her breath. Her uniform bore faint streaks of grime, dust from cubicle shelves, smudges of coffee grounds near the kitchenette, evidence of long hours and hard work. She paused, pressing the mop's head against the floor as she surveyed the next expanse. Vincent exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His fingertips itched to brush away a stray lock of hair, to offer her a glass of water, to apologize for the years he'd allowed to slip by unspoken. But he remained rooted to the spot, feeling both like an intruder and a witness to a world that had moved on without him. Ellie's back stiffened slightly. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the hallway beyond, perhaps sensing a presence, a subtle shift in the air. For a moment, their eyes met across the threshold. Time seemed to slow as the recognition flickered in her gaze. In that single heartbeat, a cascade of memories flashed before Vincent's eyes. Their first apartment's creaky hardwood floors, the late-night conversations over takeout, her laughter echoing down a dimly lit hallway as Mia chased after her with a toy car. Ellie's face went slack with surprise, then hardened into practiced neutrality. She released the mop and set it against the wall's baseboard, turning fully to face him. In the harsh glow of the office lights, he saw her features, now sharper, threaded with lines of fatigue and determination. She swept a lock of hair behind her ear, her brown eyes widening slightly as they registered the man in the doorway. Vincent, the single-syllable name, fell from her lips like a question wrapped in disbelief. His throat tightened. He wanted to reply with something eloquent, an apology, an explanation, an admission of guilt, but only the starkness of her one-word question lodged in his mind. He took a step forward, his polished shoes silent on the carpet. "Ellie," he managed, his voice low and husky. It sounded alien to his own ears, worn thin by disuse. I didn't expect to find you here." She folded her arms across her chest, her stance defensive yet weary. "No one ever expects me anywhere, Vincent." Her words were quiet, but edged with steel. "I work here." She gestured to the mop leaning against the wall. "I've been here 6 months." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. His gaze drifted to her uniform, the faint stains at her elbows. "I saw the report." He paused, his pulse hammering in his ears. "I wanted to see for myself." Ellie's jaw clenched. She glanced past him toward the hallway. "You could have made a call." The hurt in her eyes was sharper than any boardroom defeat he'd ever inflicted. "You could have helped me." The accusation landed like a cold bucket of water. Vincent's chest tightened as he searched for words, but found none adequate. He averted his eyes, blinking rapidly as if to clear a sudden haze. His world of spreadsheets and profit margins offered no guidance in this terrain of raw emotion. Ellie rubbed her arm where the polo's fabric pressed into her skin. "Why are you really here?" she asked, voice trembling on the edge between anger and something deeper, more fragile. Vincent inhaled, steadying himself. He crossed the small distance between them, mindful of the gulf that had grown over the years. "Because," he said softly, "I realized how much I've missed, how wrong I was to walk away." His words felt inadequate, pale shadows of his remorse, but he hoped they might begin to bridge the chasm between them. Ellie's stern expression faltered. For a moment, Vincent thought she might turn away or shut the door in his face. Instead, she let out a slow breath and uncrossed her arms. The mop clattered to the floor as she stepped closer, tilting her head as if weighing his sincerity. Their eyes locked again, hers searching his for truth, his swimming with regret. Outside, distant footsteps echoed down the corridor. Someone arriving for an evening meeting, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding behind Suite 4B's door. Vincent reached into his pocket, hesitating before pulling out the small Polaroid leashed to his keychain. He held it out, the photo's corner bent from years tucked away. "I kept this," he whispered. "I never stopped caring." Ellie's breath caught as she recognized the image. Mia's wide-eyed grin, her arms flung around Ellie's waist, Vincent standing beside them both. She reached out, fingertips trembling, and took the photo from him. A tear glistened at the corner of her eye. For the first time in years, there was no boardroom between them, no corporate veneer. Only two people who had once loved each other, faced with the wreckage of their shared past. The quiet of the empty office wrapped around them, offering a fragile cocoon for words unspoken, apologies long overdue, and the slim hope of something new beginning to take root. And as Vincent watched Ellie cradle that faded Polaroid, he realized that seeing her here, at her lowest, yet still carrying herself with quiet dignity, was more powerful than any empire he'd ever built. In her strength and vulnerability, he saw the measure of the woman he had lost, and the promise of a chance to find his way back. As Vincent stood in the doorway of Suite 4B, watching Ellie cradle the Polaroid like a sacred relic, his mind drifted back through the years, the moments when their lives had intertwined so seamlessly that he'd once believed nothing could ever pull them apart. Time folded in on itself, carrying him away from the sterile hush of the office into the warmth of memory. The wedding day. It had been a perfect spring afternoon. Cherry blossoms rained petals over the terrace of the botanical gardens, drifting like confetti across the white-clothed tables. Ellie wore a lace-trimmed gown that hugged her slender frame, her auburn hair swept into an elegant updo, loose tendrils framing her porcelain face. Vincent, resplendent in midnight blue tuxedo, looked at her with a mixture of awe and certainty. This was his future, his dream realized. The ceremony had been short, heartfelt vows exchanged beneath an arch of roses. Ellie's voice had trembled only once, when she promised to stand by him through wild winds and calm seas. He'd squeezed her hand and vowed to put you above all else, always. Afterwards, they danced under strings of lights, laughter and champagne bubbles mingling in the humid evening air. Mia, then a toddler in a pastel dress, twirled around her mother's feet, squealing with delight. In that moment, Vincent had thought himself invincible. He had love, a family, and a partner who believed in him. The first rift. Their honeymoon had been a whirlwind of Parisian cafes and Venetian canals. But by the time they returned, Vincent's calendar was already brimming with meetings and investor lunches. Ellie greeted him at the airport with a tired smile, clutching Mia to her chest as though she feared he might vanish again. And maybe he would, his jet-lagged apologies dissolved by 6 a.m. calls from the other side of the world. The first argument had come 2 weeks after they touched down. Ellie had asked him to move back to their cozy townhouse so Mia could stay close to her preschool and neighborhood friends. Vincent, juggling 3 acquisition deals, balked at the idea. He argued that a quick move to the city's financial district tower would be more efficient, closer to his office, closer to the power corridors. She looked at him, her eyes soft yet resolute. Home isn't efficiency, she'd said. Home is where a daughter can grow up surrounded by people who love her, not people who calculate her potential. He dismissed her concerns, citing market projections and commute times. She'd retreated that night, leaving him alone in their master suite, the bed made neatly on only one side. The cracks widened. As the months passed, arguments over dinner became inevitable. Ellie wanted evenings together, family dinners, bedtime stories, while Vincent brought his laptop to the table, negotiating contracts between bites of roast chicken. She chastised him gently at first, her concern for their daughter's emotional well-being shining through. "She asked for you today, at school," she'd whispered one night, voice quivering. "Can you come by tomorrow?" He promised, then canceled at the last minute with a terse text. Board meeting conflict. "Sorry." Mia began to ask for Dada instead, as if searching for a father who had grown distant. Ellie's shoulders slumped in the doorway when she tucked Mia in, her lullaby voice laced with resignation. Vincent watched from the hallway, guilt clawing at him, but he told himself he was building a brighter future for them, that his sacrifices now would pay dividends later. At the time, it felt like a fair trade. The breaking point. It was a bleak December evening when everything came to a head. A brutal winter storm had grounded flights, canceled power across half the city, and stranded countless cars on impassable roads. Vincent's office generator hummed deep into the night as he worked to finalize a hostile takeover that would cement his reputation. He'd receive an email from Ellie's number. "I need to talk. Please come home." He'd type back, "Busy. Talk tomorrow." By the time he trudged into their townhouse, snow up to his calves, he found the front door ajar. Inside, Ellie stood in the foyer, coat still on, Mia asleep in a battered stroller. Her cheeks were stained with tears. The apartment was lit only by a single flickering candle. "You said tomorrow, Vince," she'd said, voice breaking. "Tomorrow never came. I can't wait any longer." She handed him divorce papers. He stared blankly, the wind and guilt swirling in his chest like a blizzard. She said he could sign them or he could stay, and their daughter would choose her mother. His pen hovered over the paper, but he walked away without signing. The next morning, the papers were filed. They'd spent a final hour packing Mia's things together, tears and whispered apologies failing to bridge years of neglect. Ellie carried Mia out into the snowstorm as Vincent watched from the window, the lights of his empire burning bright, while his home lay dark and empty. Aftermath. In the days that followed, Vincent threw himself into work with renewed ferocity. He banned memories of Ellie and Mia from his mind, believing that focus and discipline could heal all wounds. He gave no thought to who would raise Mia, where Ellie would go, or how they would survive. To him, financial security was the ultimate parent's gift. Money could fix schooling, housing, healthcare. Only now did he realize how hollow that belief had been. Standing in Suite 4B, mopping forgotten, Ellie held the Polaroid to her chest. Vincent's chest constricted as he watched her, the past no longer a distant echo, but a living ache. The flashbacks had revealed more than nostalgic moments. They'd exposed the fractures in their union. Ambition overriding affection, schedules supplanting smiles, boardrooms pushing bedsides aside. He understood then that success measured only in dollars and deals was a poor substitute for the love he had squandered. The reverie broke when Ellie gently laid the Polaroid on the mop bucket rim and met his gaze with a question that echoed from their past, one he could no longer evade. "Why are you really here?" With the memories still fresh in his mind, Vincent knew his answer had to be more than regret. It had to be a promise, a pledge to rebuild what he had broken, to value moments over margins, and to reclaim the family he had lost. As the hum of the HVAC filled the room, he prepared to speak the words that might begin their healing. Vincent lingered just outside Suite 4B, heart hammering as adrenaline and remorse meshed into a single, overwhelming sensation. The dimly lit hallway offered scant cover, but the bruised carpet and flickering lights provided enough shadow to conceal his tailored silhouette. He pressed himself flat against the wall, arms crossed, as though bracing for a blow. Every nerve in his body tingled with anticipation and dread. Through the narrow crack of the slightly ajar door, he could see Ellie moving with quiet purpose. She dusted the top of a bookshelf in the corner, her movements methodical and deliberate, a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of his own life. Her mop and bucket waited nearby, silent witnesses to her labor. From this vantage point, he noticed the small details he'd missed in the past 6 years. The way a stray curl escaped her ponytail and brushed against her cheek, the soft crease in her brow when she reached for the dust cloth, the gentle arc of her fingers as they skimmed across the polished wood. Each action was imbued with a dignity he hadn't recognized before. Here was a woman who refused to let hardship define her. She worked with her head held high, even as the world around her had narrowed to fluorescent overhead lights and the faint tang of cleaning solution. He wondered how many nights she'd lain in bed, replaying the echoes of her own laughter, wondering where her life had veered off course. And he wondered, with a pang of self-reproach, why he had refused to be there to catch her when she stumbled. A sudden metallic clang made him start. Ellie had bumped a chair against the wall. She winced, pressing a hand to the back of her neck as if warding off a strain. Vincent felt a stab of guilt. Every sound seemed amplified, a reminder of his own absence. He leaned forward imperceptibly, drawn to her vulnerability, yet fearful of startling her. He forced himself to take a breath, steadying the swirl of emotions. Pride, his old, reliable companion, warned him to retreat, to maintain control. But another voice, softer and more insistent, whispered that this was his moment to witness the truth unvarnished. The price Ellie paid for his ambition, and the resilience she carried in her bones. He rifled through his memory for anything that might explain how she ended up here. He recalled the divorce settlement, his financial provision, carefully calculated to cover child support, mortgage payments, even college tuition. On paper, it had been generous, yet he had never asked how she managed the day-to-day realities. The late shifts, the exhaustion, the creeping loneliness that accompanied low-wage work. He had assumed money alone would suffice, never considering the emotional toll of starting over in a world that measured worth by one's resume rather than one's heart. Ellie straightened, dust rag in hand, and paused to glance at the photo on her desk, an image of Mia's kindergarten class, drawn in crayon. The little girl's stick figure smile and scrawled signature tugged at Vincent's chest so fiercely he thought he might cough. He edged closer, careful to stay in shadow, and watched as Ellie picked up the drawing and placed it gently against the base of the photo frame. Her eyes shimmered for a moment as she smoothed the paper flat, tracing the lines of Mia's handwriting with a fingertip. He swallowed hard. That drawing represented everything he'd forfeited, a life anchored in simple joys and heartfelt connections. He thought back to Mia's first scribbles at home. She had proudly presented her masterpiece, singing "Look, Daddy," in a voice full of wonder. He had nodded distractedly, eyes glued to his phone, murmuring, "Very nice, sweetheart," before slipping away to another meeting. The memory hit him like a blow. A low hum drifted from down the hall, footsteps approaching. Vincent's pulse kicked up another notch. He retreated a half step, pressing his back against the wall as the distant footsteps grew louder. The hallway lights flickered in sequence, illuminating the door to Suite 4B in brief, strobe-like bursts. In that fractured light, he saw Ellie's reflection in the glass of her desk photo frame, standing small and resolute in an impersonal office. The footsteps halted just outside the suite. Vincent held his breath. The doorknob rattled briefly, then silence returned. He exhaled quietly, reminding himself that he needed to see this through before making his presence known. He shifted forward again, determined to catalog every nuance of her world. The tired set of her shoulders, the way her uniform stretched over her form, the faint film of dust on her hands. She moved next to the mop bucket and unscrewed the wringer, tilting her head as she considered the task ahead. Vincent watched her dip the mop into the soapy water, then wring it with muscular forearms that spoke of daily exertion. The scent of detergent drifted past him, a sharp contrast to the subtle notes of expensive cologne he was accustomed to. He had never before paid attention to scent as a measure of circumstance. Now it seemed to him that each whiff carried the weight of her sacrifices. As she began to mop again, her movements became more fluid, almost meditative. He realized she had developed her own rhythm, each stroke of the mop a quiet assertion of dignity in a role many would deem unglamorous. He felt a surge of admiration, mingled with sorrow. How many times had he trampled on her dreams? How many evenings had he left her alone with a toddler, convinced that his financial largesse would compensate for his absence? He pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the rapid thump of his heart against the fabric of his shirt. Time stretched on in that silent vigil until Ellie paused once more and leaned over to pick up a fallen business card from the floor. She inspected it briefly, a glossy white card with the company's logo, and slipped it into her pocket before resuming her work. Vincent realized with a start that she was protecting even these small tokens of her day, perhaps as a reminder that she was more than just a cleaner. She was, in her own right, a professional, entitled to respect and appreciation. A final clang echoed through the corridor as Ellie set the business card pocket, rubbed her palms together, and glanced toward the door, as if sensing, finally, the presence he'd been hiding. Vincent froze. This was no longer about gathering evidence. It was about recognition and reconciliation. He stepped forward, heart pounding in his ears, willing himself to cross the threshold. Before he could move, Ellie straightened and raised her head. Their eyes met again, she in full view this time. No masks, no uniforms, just two souls scanning each other for truth. Vincent drew a shaky breath and prepared to speak the words he had rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind. But even before he opened his mouth, he knew that this moment of seeing her here in the quiet aftermath of her labors had already said more than words ever could. Vincent's pulse pounded like a freight train as he stepped fully into the hallway, the worn carpet muffling his careful tread. The faint aroma of lemon-scented cleaning solution lingered in the air, mingling with the distant hum of fluorescent lights. His eyes remained fixed on Ellie, who was straightening a stack of folders on one of the empty desks. She'd sensed him finally, and yet still pressed on, as though determined to finish her work before addressing the disruption at the door. He opened his mouth to speak, to reach out and explain himself, but the words caught in his throat. In that moment, a soft thud reverberated behind him, followed by a small, tentative voice. "Mommy!" Vincent's breath caught. He spun toward the sound and saw a little girl standing at the far end of the corridor, just beyond the threshold of Suite 4B. She wore a pastel pink backpack that dwarfed her slight frame, and her dark hair was pulled into two uneven pigtails. In one hand, she clutched a well-loved stuffed rabbit, its fur matted from countless hugs. Her wide brown eyes, rimmed with curiosity and concern, were fixed on Ellie. Ellie stiffened, her spine straightening as though bracing for an unexpected gale. Vincent watched as her face softened, the steel in her features giving way to tenderness. "Mia," she called, voice low but urgent. The little girl took a cautious step forward, her tiny shoes scuffing the carpet. I left my library book," she stammered, her voice quavering between relief and confusion. "Then I saw you." Ellie set the folders aside and knelt down, unzipping Mia's backpack to slip the book inside. "Sweetheart, I told you I'd meet you at the lobby," she said gently, smoothing a stray curl from Mia's face. "Daddy, your dad, is here." Mia's eyes drifted to Vincent, lingering on his dark lens cap and windbreaker. He felt the world shrink to the space between them. Father, mother, and child in a silent tableau that pulsed with unspoken history. Little Mia tilted her head, glancing at the mop bucket and then back at him. "Are you my daddy?" Ellie rose, tugging Mia close to her side protectively. Vincent swallowed against the lump in his throat, feeling the weight of every lost year in that single, tentative question. He took a slow step forward, removing his cap with both hands to appear less imposing. The hallway's fluorescent glare picked out the stubble on his jaw and the lines at the corner of his eyes, features Mia would never have seen him wear. "Yes, Mia," he said softly, voice trembling with an emotion he seldom allowed himself to feel. "I'm your dad." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Mia's shoulders slumped in relief, and she uncurled her arms from around her rabbit. "Daddy," she repeated, stepping toward him. Her small hand reached out uncertainly, palm up. Ellie's heart clenched as she watched Vincent's gaze flicker between her and their daughter. He knelt down until his eyes were level with Mia's, arms splayed in welcome. "I'm so sorry I missed so much," he whispered, breathing in the scent of her hair, strawberry shampoo and afternoon sunshine. "Can you forgive me?" Mia hesitated only a moment, then climbed into his arms, pressing her cheek into his chest. She wrapped both arms around his neck, and Vincent felt a flood of warmth surge through him. It was as if every loneliness he'd buried in his penthouse paled in comparison to this simple embrace. Ellie exhaled softly, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. She stood a step behind them, watching as father and daughter reunited. The rhythmic beeping of the intercom and the distant footsteps of an arriving tenant faded into insignificance. In that corridor, time had paused, and Vincent realized that nothing in his empire could ever match the significance of this moment. After a long beat, Mia pulled back slightly and asked, "Will you walk me down?" He glanced at Ellie, who nodded, offering him a small, tentative smile, an unspoken permission. Vincent stood, cradling Mia's hand in his, and together the three of them walked slowly down the hall toward the elevator. With each step, He felt the weight of his past mistakes lifting, replaced by a tender resolve to make up for lost time. When the elevator doors slid open, Vincent pressed the button for lobby with a gentle tap of his daughter's palm. As they descended, he glanced at Ellie, who met his gaze with a mixture of hope and caution. He offered her a small, sincere nod. She returned it, her posture relaxed for the first time since he'd walked through that door. And in that tight, orange-lit elevator, the boundaries of father, mother, and child shifted. Old wounds began to mend, and Vincent Carrington felt, for the first time in years, the warmth of a family reunited. As the elevator doors closed behind them, Vincent Carrington felt the tightness in his chest begin to loosen for the first time in years. Mia pressed her small hand into his, head resting against his side as the car descended. Ellie hovered a half-step behind them, her eyes flicking between father and daughter, uncertain whether to relax or remain vigilant. When the doors opened onto the lobby, Vincent led Mia toward the plush seating area near the reception desk. The floor was marble, cool under his polished shoes, a stark contrast to the worn carpet of the fourth floor. Yet today it felt like walking on a sacred ground. He glanced down at Mia, whose eyes brimmed with wonder. "How was school today?" he asked softly, kneeling so his face was level with hers. Mia considered, one finger tugging at the rabbit's ear. "We made fairy houses in art class," she said, voice low with excitement. "And I got to read my story to everyone." Vincent felt a surge of pride, so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. "That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I missed it." He tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Will you tell me all about it?" Before Mia could answer, Ellie cleared her throat. "Vincent," her voice was gentle but firm, carrying the weight of the years between them. "If you're going to do this, if you're really here to be a part of Mia's life, you need to understand what it's been like." She folded her arms, gaze steady. 6 months ago, I applied for this janitorial position because I needed stability. Nothing fancy, just a paycheck I could count on. Vincent nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't think." Ellie held up a hand. "You didn't think. You thought money would solve it all." She knelt to Mia's level. "Mia, can you go with Mr. Thompson to the lobby? He's your teacher's husband. He's here to pick you up." Mia looked between them, confusion flickering across her face. "Okay, Mommy." She slipped her hand from Vincent's and padded over to a tall, bespectacled man who had appeared beside the security desk. He knelt and smiled, adjusting the strap of Mia's backpack. "Hi, Mia. How was school?" Mia shrugged, then whispered, "I met my daddy." She glanced back at Vincent, eyes shining. Mr. Thompson beamed. "That's wonderful. See you tomorrow, sweetheart." He took her hand gently and led her toward the building's main exit. As the automatic doors closed behind them, the lobby felt unnaturally large and silent. Ellie rose and turned to Vincent, her expression softening with the absence of their daughter. "When she asked for me after school, I panicked," she admitted, voice wavering. "I didn't know what to do, whether to take her home here or see if I could find you." She pressed her palms together, a gesture Vincent remembered from their first apartment, when she prayed late at night. "And I was afraid you wouldn't care." Vincent's throat tightened. He took a cautious step toward her. "I care more than anything." He reached out, fingertips grazing her elbow. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to try. For Mia's sake, for ours." Ellie's eyes shone with tears she refused to let spill. She nodded once, decisively. "Then start by helping me with this." She gestured toward the heavy mop bucket parked beside the reception desk. "I need to finish the evening walkthrough. You can carry the bucket, and I'll mopping down the main hall." The offer surprised him, an invitation not only to witness her labor, but to share it. Vincent squared his shoulders. "I can do that." She handed him the handle of the wringer bucket. It was heavier than he expected. The water sloshed with each step. Ellie picked up the mop, wrung it deftly, and began to sweep it across the glossy marble floor. Vincent followed, placing the bucket and mop head exactly as she did, each movement deliberate. They worked side by side in near silence. The only sound was the rasp of the mop against the floor and the soft drip of water from the wringer. In that rhythm, Vincent felt the distance between them shrink. The years of missed birthdays, skipped recitals, and cold business dinners all distilled into the simple act of mopping. He caught Ellie's eye once, and she offered him a small, wry smile, the same smile she'd given him on the night before their wedding, when she teased him about his inability to dance. When they reached the far end of the lobby, Ellie paused and set down the mop. She straightened, brushing lint from her polo shirt. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking him squarely in the eye. Vincent dropped the bucket gently and moved so they stood face to face. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. "Thank you for letting me," he replied, voice thick. "For giving me a chance, even when I didn't deserve one." She exhaled, a fragile sigh that nonetheless carried hope. "Just don't leave again." He cupped her face, thumb brushing away a stray eyelash. "I won't." In the hushed lobby, amid the scent of cleaning solution and the soft hum of the air conditioning, Vincent Carrington felt something shift irrevocably. The fortress he had built around his heart was crumbling, replaced by tenderness and the promise of a new beginning. As they stood there, side by side, he understood that his greatest acquisition would not be a company or a skyscraper. It would be the trust of the two most important people in his life. When Vincent, Ellie, and Mia stepped out of the elevator into the cool evening air, the building's muted bustle felt miles away. The small plaza in front of Crescent Professional Suites was deserted, save for a lone street lamp whose halo pooled softly on the pavement. Mia clutched her rabbit in one hand and Vincent's fingers in the other, her other arm looped through her mother's. Ellie paused, drawing a deep breath as she let her daughter's weight settle comfortably against her side. Vincent exhaled slowly, steeling himself for the conversation he'd avoided for so long. The ache in his chest pulsed with guilt and hope in equal measure. "Ellie," he began, voice husky in the quiet dusk. "Thank you for letting me be here tonight, for Mia's sake." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the pale glow of the street lamp. The brief vulnerability in her gaze was one he recognized from the early days of their marriage, before ambition overshadowed affection. "You showed up," she said simply. "That means something." He nodded, though the weight of unspoken apologies made his neck feel stiff. "I know it's not enough to just show up once." He paused, raking a hand through his hair. "I want to rebuild what we lost." Ellie studied him thoughtfully, her brow furrowing. "Rebuild," she repeated. "It's not a construction project, Vincent. It's people, feelings, trust." "Understand," he said, swallowing hard. "But I don't know where to start." She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were steady. "Start by telling me who you are now, without the suits and the numbers." Vincent's breath caught. For years, he had hidden behind titles and spreadsheets, but now he felt naked without them. I'm still me," he began, "but I'm tired of letting work define me. I want to be a father who shows up, a man who can put family first." Ellie took a small step closer, releasing Mia's hand to fold her arms, as though testing the solidity of his words. "Words are easy. Actions matter." He nodded, turning to Mia and crouching so they were eye to eye. "Sweetheart," he said softly, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "Would you like to go to the park this weekend? Just us three?" Mia's eyes lit up. "Yes," she exclaimed, hopping on the spot. She looked up at her mother, awaiting approval. Ellie bit her lip, torn between hope and caution. Finally, she leaned down and kissed Mia's cheek. "We'll see," she said, voice gentle but guarded. Then she straightened and faced Vincent. "If you want to prove you're serious, be there. No cancellations." His gaze flicked to her earnest face, then back to their daughter. "I promise," he said. "No cancellations." Ellie nodded slowly, but didn't reach out. Instead, she looked at the pavement, as if gauging whether their shaky footing could support a bridge. Vincent sensed her hesitation as keenly as he felt his own remorse. He took a careful step forward and extended his hand, not with the authority of Tycoon, but with the humility of a man seeking forgiveness. "May I have your hand?" Ellie regarded him for a long moment, then placed her fingertips in his palm. The contact was electric, warm, tentative, and entirely new. Mia gasped with delight, stepping between them and taking both of their hands. For a moment, the three of them stood in a small circle under the amber street lamp, hands linked, forming a fragile loop of hope. The distant hum of car engines and the faint trickle of the river beyond the lot were reminders of the world outside. But here and now, family felt possible again. Ellie drew a quiet breath. "Let's walk," she said, guiding them down the sidewalk toward the small park across the street. Vincent strode beside her, careful to match her pace, his heart lightening with each step. Mia skipped ahead, her laughter like a bell breaking the silence. As they reached the park gate, Ellie paused and glanced at Vincent. "One more thing," she said, folding her arms. "You said you wanted to be a father who shows up. I need you to meet with the building manager tomorrow at noon. He wants to discuss a long-term cleaning contract, and I'll need your business acumen to negotiate fair wages for the staff and maybe upgrade some equipment." Vincent blinked. Negotiating a contract for janitorial supplies was entirely outside his usual purview, but the spark in Ellie's voice, an echo of the partner he once admired, filled him with determination. "Consider done," he replied. Ellie offered him a small, hesitant smile, the first one in years that wasn't tinged with regret. "Good," she said, "because Mia and we could use a little help." With that, they crossed the street together, forging a path through the dusky park. Vincent carried the mop bucket of their shared past, not as a burden, but as a symbol of the work still to be done. His steps were sure, guided by the promise of what lay ahead. Bright sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the cleaning contractor's modest office the next afternoon. Vincent arrived precisely at noon, suit sleeves rolled up and tie loosened, a deliberate contrast to the perfectly polished image he usually presented. Ellie stood beside him, clutching a folder filled with spreadsheets and invoices scrawled in neat handwriting. The building manager, a rotund man named Mr. Jenkins, rose from behind his desk and greeted them with a broad smile. "Mr. Carrington, Ms. Carrington," he boomed, extending both hands. Ellie offered only a polite nod, but Vincent shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Ellie tells me you want to discuss a long-term cleaning contract for this building." Mr. Jenkins eased into a visitor's chair and gestured to a pair of folding chairs across from his desk. "That's right. We've been renewing short-term agreements for years, and it's getting expensive. If we lock in a multi-year deal, we can save on labor costs, but I'd also like to improve the quality of service." He tapped the desk. "The current equipment is over a decade old. The staff deserves better tools." Ellie laid the folder on the desk. "Here are last year's expenses and a list of broken or outdated machines," she explained. Vincent glanced at the pages, dented mop buckets, squeegees, missing handles, vacuums that wheezed through hallways. He recalled watching Ellie work with that same outdated equipment and felt a tightening in his chest. "Mr. Jenkins," Vincent began, leaning forward, "I can commit to a 3-year contract at a rate 15% higher than your current budget, provided we allocate funds to replace all worn equipment this quarter." He paused, letting the offer sink in. New vacuums, ergonomically designed mops, modern wringer buckets. Everything your staff needs to do their jobs with dignity and efficiency. Mr. Jenkins whistled low. "That's generous, generous indeed. We'd love that." He scribbled a note on a pad. "I can draft the contract this afternoon if you like." Ellie's eyes met Vincent's, and a flicker of pride lit her gaze. She nodded. "That sounds perfect." Vincent closed the deal swiftly, then rose, smoothing his suit jacket. "I'll have the paperwork signed by end of day," he said, "and I'll oversee the equipment orders personally." He offered Mr. Jenkins his business card. "Don't hesitate to call me with any questions." As they left the office, Ellie exhaled and allowed herself a small, genuine smile. "You did it," she said softly. He shrugged, but his grin was proud. "I saw what you dealt with every night. It shouldn't have stayed that way." Ellie's expression softened. "Thank you, not just for the contract, but for understanding." Vincent reached out, brushing her hand. "It's just the beginning." Over the next several weeks, Vincent immersed himself in Ellie and Mia's world. He attended Mia's school play, cheering from the front row. He accompanied Ellie on her evening rounds, carrying equipment and bringing fresh supplies. Each night, he returned to his penthouse, and found it hollow without their laughter echoing in the halls. Slowly, he reconfigured his calendar. Board meetings gave way to family dinners. Conference calls were rescheduled to make room for bedtime stories. Ellie watched the transformation with cautious wonder. Where once Vincent's visits were fleeting, he now cultivated a genuine partnership, helping her manage routes, listening when she spoke of hopes beyond cleaning jobs, and supporting Mia's fledgling drawings of Daddy's big building. She, in turn, allowed herself to trust again, offering him glimpses of her quiet strength and the warmth that had first drawn him to her. One crisp Saturday morning, they gathered in the small park where they'd taken Mia after the initial reunion. Mia's backpack bulged with art supplies, and she wore a handmade, world's best dad, metal sheet crafted from paper and yarn. Ellie carried a small picnic basket, while Vincent balanced a thermos of hot chocolate and fresh pastries. They sat on a checkered blanket beneath the budding cherry trees, laughter mingling with birdsong. Vincent lifted Mia into his lap and asked about her latest fairy house. Ellie watched them, the corners of her mouth lifting in a smile that reached her eyes. He reached across and gently squeezed her hand. In that moment, amidst the simple joys of spring and small triumphs of everyday life, Vincent understood that the most valuable acquisitions weren't skyscrapers or market share. They were moments like this: togetherness, trust, and the chance to write a different story from the one he'd nearly lost. To you, dear reader, thank you for joining Vincent, Ellie, and Mia on this journey from regret to redemption. If their story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of transformation and hope. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, because every story grows richer when shared. Until next time, may you never underestimate the power of showing up.